Hey, what's up everybody, Kip here, and today we're going to be expanding on my Moba marketing video, and specifically we're going to be talking about design philosophy in MOBAs that have been recent, and talk about the success and failure of recent games and how design philosophy kind of play a part in it. So let's just start by I'm going to use some terms, and I want you guys to hold on to this for the rest of the video. Okay, so I'm going to use these two terms. On one side there is the casuals, on the other side there's the hardcore players. Now obviously these terms are very, very overused nowadays, but I just want you to realize that these terms are extremes, and that these terms, they have to be extreme in order to show you left and right, and in order to kind of understand what the middle ground is, because you can understand that it's like a core player, or like somebody who is like the perfect medium, is in between these two extremes. So I just want you to understand that I'm using these words and they are extremes. So whenever I talk about one of the groups, understand I'm talking about the extreme. I'm talking about everything on that side, rather than just on the very, very 0.1% of hardcore or casual players. I want you to keep this in mind while I go through this. So now that disclaimer is done, let's get into it. So design philosophy is always really interesting when it comes down to MOBAs, because there's kind of this cycle where you have the casual players who basically are going to be the majority of your player base. You cannot get around this. But then you have the hardcore players, who are players that are deeply rooted, play 8 to 10, 12 hours a day, and also promote games through like the streaming culture that we have now, the YouTube, like whatever, you know? They're whatever mediums they want to express themselves, whatever. Like they're out there, and the way that these two groups, they feed into each other. So the casual players are the majority of your scene. People will then look to the hardcore players, the people who are super deeply rooted into the scene, and they they will aspire to become something like that. So then they start pushing towards away from the casual and into the hardcore. So instead of being like, if there's a percentage and like the 50% is like the perfect neutral, then they would go from like 0% to like 25%. That's essentially like this push of like, this is the progression within the players, and this is like the market they're looking at. So the thing is that these are these two parties, and you're going to appease one of them, okay? And the problem that MOBAs have is that MOBAs have been trying to become too accessible, when really these games are generally made to be competitive. The appeal of the game is to be competitive. I reiterated this so many times. The appeal of the game is to be competitive. At the end of the day, if the game is not competitive and not a good esport, it is not a good MOBA. And that might seem rather harsh, but it is really true. If you aren't competitive, if it isn't a competitive MOBA, then really what's the point of playing a MOBA? Because, like I said, it's all about personal progression, something to aspire to, something to get better for. It's all about playing the best you can in order to be the best, whatever. You know, these are like the appeals of the genre. Otherwise, you would play something else, something that you can just pick up, and something that, if you want to just gear progression, you play an MMO, or you just play just a classic single player RPG. You know, it's just. So the point is that you're going to appeal to either of these two parties. So for instance, when you make changes that make the game less competitive, you appeal to the casual players, which in turn, what people might think is that the barrier of entry will be lower, so more people will play. But that's not true, because you have to keep in mind that both of these groups, the casuals and the hardcores, they go hand in hand. So essentially, if you appeal to hardcore players, the barrier of entry goes higher. If you appeal to the casual players, it goes lower. And essentially, there has to be room to grow at every single level. Otherwise, the game becomes stale, especially as a PvP game. So, for instance, if the barrier entry when the barrier of entry moves down, more often than not, the skill cap goes down as well. This is like the very big issue. There are some changes that lower the barrier of entry and keep the skill cap as high as it always been, and you can say that that's potentially better in some cases. But these are very few changes that I think happen. Most of these would be like quality of life changes, just making things generally easier to see, or just easier in general. These are like the only changes I could see that could like do something like that. So the problem that Paragon had in particular, because obviously most of you, or if not all of you, have played Paragon who watch my channel, is the fact that they just kept on appealing to the casual players. Like, this was like the real big issue. They just kept on appealing to the casual players, and I'm sure that the casual players didn't even want this. I'm really not trying to antagonize anybody when I say that they were trying to appeal to the casual players. It's just that's the design philosophy that they had. You could even see at the closing notes of like their goodbye letter, or like, an open discussion of where we're at post, like, all that stuff. It's like, oh, they were looking for mainstream success and all this. How do you get more people? You appeal to more groups. The competitive or hardcore players, whatever you want to call them, are not going to be the majority of your players. So you do not appeal to them. You appeal to the mass majority. And therefore, if you appeal to the mass majority, more people will play. This is like the general idea of what it is. So this is kind of where we're at in MOBAs. They're being designed for people in order to just easily pick up and play. But the thing is that I don't think that that's really an issue. If the game has a learning curve, it's fun developing as a player in order to get to that learning curve. I'm playing Smite currently, and relearning the game is fun. I'm losing a lot, and people might think that that's not a lot of fun, or like I'm missing a lot of abilities, but there is growth for when I finally do hit those abilities that I've been missing, or I am just becoming more consistent. Even when you see that, there's like a there is a lot of like, it's just a really good, nice, satisfying feeling about getting that. And a lot of these games that appeal to casuals, they kind of lose that. And this is just the issue. So for any developer that really wants mainstream success, I would say that obviously you cannot appease both parties, but you have to keep them both in mind. You have to, otherwise the game will become too stale, or the game just won't be competitive, and therefore the game just won't exist at some point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll have a third part to my Moba Market series, and then this will be over. Sorry about not uploading for a while. I had some stuff I had to do. I haven't really been streaming either, just a lot of IRL stuff. I'm going to start uploading again. Hope you guys enjoyed this. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and peace.